Well, hello confirmation friends. Welcome to confirmation instructional video number 11. As you can see, I am in new surroundings here. Last week I moved homes, so everything's gonna look a little different, but I think the instruction will be the same. So welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining me on this day. Thanks for continuing along in this weird year. I hope that the instruction is going okay. Please, if you have any questions or anything, just email me or text me or get in touch with me in any way. I would be happy to answer any of your questions. We're going to continue on from last time, continuing on in Manna and Mercy, chapter 9, I think. We're going to do the last half of chapter 9 now. You have a few things that I had you read from the Bible, and you've read from pages 34 to something to the end of the chapter. So 34, 35, 36, 37, and 38. Now, this is setting us all up for the birth of Jesus in the next chapter. Now, it's important to get a sense of exactly what was going on in Jewish society at the time that Jesus was born. This is the context he was born into. And a lot of the people that I'm going to talk about today and that you read about in Manna and Mercy, you will recognize the names of these groups from the New Testament, from the gospel stories. And these are the people Jesus interacts with. These are the people Jesus is from. These are the people that really shape Jesus' message and the way that he expressed the good news in his society. It was all done in this very specific context. So just to review, to bring us up to speed again, you'll remember that when the people were in exile in Babylon, they were there for about 70 years, and then the Persians defeated the Babylonians, and the Persians under Cyrus allowed the people to come back to the land. That went okay. The Persians, though, were in turn defeated by the Greeks, and that went okay until a ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, or the manifestation of God, brought a heavy hand to bear on the Jewish people, wanted them to worship him, wanted them to adopt Greek culture. There was a lot of resistance to that, and eventually a revolt under the Maccabee brothers drove the Greeks out and established Jewish independence for the first time in a long time, right? For the first time in 700 years or whatever. So for about 100 years, the Hasmoneans rule an independent Jewish state. But big deal priests assume control, and we're going to hear more about the big deal priests coming up, and society begins to rot and to smell foul. The big deal priests collaborated with the Hasmoneans to rule their own people and to accumulate bigger and bigger manna piles and to take more and more of the land for themselves. And you remember, the land was supposed to be the manna. The land was supposed to be all divided up equally so that everyone would have enough. But under the Hasmoneans and the big deal priests, that whole system is just thrown out the window. So the Hasmoneans rule from about 140 BCE to 37 years BCE, so about 37 years before Jesus is born, but the Roman Empire begins to establish its rule in 63. So now the Roman Empire is the big power in the western part of the world. They take over most of the former Greek Empire and expand even beyond those borders. So they begin to establish their rule in the area about 63 years before Jesus is born. And of course, Jesus will be born while the Romans are ruling. We know this, of course, from the gospel accounts. Okay, so today I just want to review what you read in your book and just break it down for you, and hopefully in a way that you can remember a little more easily. There's a lot of information in Manna and Mercy, so I just want to simplify that a little bit for you today. This is the society that Jesus was born into, okay? As we know, the Romans are ruling. Now, the Romans inherit a lot of Greek culture, right? As you might know if you studied mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, the stories are very, very similar between the Greek and the Roman mythology, but the names of the gods simply have been changed, right? So Zeus in Greek mythology becomes Jupiter in Roman mythology, and so on. So the Romans want to impose their culture and create some uniformity in their empire, right? Something that will hold this vast empire together. They want to try and do it through kind of forcing people to adopt Greek culture, not unlike under the Greeks. So the Romans are ruling. They are ruling in collaboration with the priests, as we know, but we'll hear more about that in a second. And the question is, they're ruling, they have all the power, just like these foreign empires had for so many years before the Hasmoneans as well. The question is, how do the Jewish people respond? How do they respond in this situation? Well, there are four main ways. There are four main responses that emerge. Now, the first response you already know because it was already going on under the Hasmoneans. The big deal priests see which way the wind is going, and they decide to collaborate or cooperate with the ruling power. So the big deal temple priests. This group has a name called the Sadducees, which is kind of a funny name. The Sadducees. They collaborate with the Romans and they help the Romans rule. They continue to hang on to their big manna piles that they developed under the Hasmoneans this way. And they become richer and richer while others, the poor, become poorer and poorer. So that's one way to respond, right? Just get on the bandwagon. Help out the rulers, no matter who they are or what they stand for. Let's just protect what we have. That is what the Sadducees did. And you will, of course, hear about the Sadducees in the gospel stories of Jesus. Okay, that's one way. Cooperate with the rulers. Another way, obviously, is to resist the rulers. Now, there were different ways of resisting the Romans that developed among the Jewish people. And the first way, so the second way of responding, but one of the ways that they resisted was through the so-called bandit groups. And that is not really a great translation, the bandit groups. They were more like, you might call them terrorists, I guess, or you might call them freedom fighters, depending on your point of view. But they were people who violently resist the Romans. So they take up arms, they try to fight the Romans, they try to violently overthrow the Romans, and they are often killed by the Romans as traitors. Now, you'll remember maybe in one of the gospel stories about Jesus' crucifixion that there were two bandits hung with him. These were violent resistors to the empire. That is why they were executed. They weren't just executed for stealing some tomatoes from the market. They were violent resistors of the Romans. So that's another way to respond, right? Okay, let's violently resist. There are other ways of resisting that don't involve violence, though. As you remember me saying, the Romans tried to impose Greek culture on the Jewish people. And some, like the bandits, violently resisted. Others thought, well, how can we preserve our identity in the face of this violently oppressive empire? Well, let's just double down on our own identity, on our own religion, on our own faith. Let's keep our faith scrupulously. Let's follow the letter of the law. Let's take the Bible seriously. Let's try and maintain our identity by adhering as closely as we can to all the laws and the purity laws. Let's keep ourselves pure. in this culture. We won't violently resist, but we will hang on to who we are. So the Pharisees are the third way that the Jewish people respond. They resist the Romans and Roman culture by maintaining pure Jewish identity within society. So they go about their daily work. They live in the cities. They live in the towns. All the while, every day, they are striving to be as faithful as they can to the Jewish religion. Now, Jesus, you'll also hear quite a bit in the Gospels about the Pharisees in the Gospels, as Jesus has lots of interaction with the Pharisees, and sometimes he's quite hard on the Pharisees, as he is on the Sadducees. But most likely, Jesus grew out of this context. Jesus most likely had training as a rabbi, as a teacher, in the tradition of the Pharisees. So in many ways, Jesus was most like the Pharisees of all of these groups. They tried to resist Romans and Roman culture by maintaining pure Jewish identity within society. Now, very like the Pharisees, very similar, but taking it to kind of an even more extreme because they thought they could not maintain their most pure Jewish identity within society, were the Essenes. Now, the Essenes resist the Romans and Roman culture by maintaining pure Jewish identity, like the Pharisees, but outside society and in the desert. So they leave the cities and the towns altogether. They go establish their own little communities way out in the desert where they are effectively completely removed from Greek and Roman influence. And it's there that they feel they can keep the most pure way of being Jewish and following all of the laws in the Old Testament. And they resist that way by simply leaving society altogether so they can be who they are. That's the Essenes. Okay, so Sadducees collaborate. Bandits violently resist. Pharisees try to maintain pure Jewish identity within society. The Essenes try to maintain pure Jewish identity outside of society in the desert. Now, all the while the Sadducees and the Romans are creating bigger and bigger manna piles, society is returning to that pyramid-shaped structure that they had left in Egypt so long ago, and that occasionally resurfaced in the land, the complete opposite of God's dream for a manna society. But now, once again, society is looking very, very much like Pharaoh's Egypt. And so, of course, on the bottom of that pyramid are, the poor. This isn't really a response. This is just, it's a fifth group of people who are very, very numerous and become more and more numerous under the Romans. It's just the reality of their situation. Poverty becomes much, much greater at this particular moment in Jewish history. More and more people become pure. The poor simply grew more and more numerous as the Romans and the Sadducees hoarded more and more of the land and therefore of the wealth. The poor. I think I explained this before, but what would happen is that because most of the wealth in the ancient world was held in land, if you didn't have land, you really didn't have anything. You couldn't grow your own food. You couldn't grow a little bit of excess food to sell. If you didn't have land, you were very, very poor. You could lose your land if you went into debt. It would be the way of paying your debt would simply be to sell your land. If things were really extreme, you would sell yourself, and you would sell yourself into slavery. And that was probably the worst situation of all. Many people lost their land at this time. And if you wanted to kind of try and eke out a living, you would turn to manual labor. And what was one of those manual labor type jobs you might turn to if you had lost your land and were very, very poor? Well, you might become a carpenter. Carpenters have especially finishing carpenters, have quite an elevated place in our society, but that was not the case really too much back in the day. So according to some traditions, of course, Jesus's father, Joseph, was a carpenter. So we might guess from that Jesus was born into quite a poor family that had lost its land through debt under the Romans and the Sadducees. So there's a little interesting bit of information. Jesus likely came from quite a poor background. Now, as you read in Manna and Mercy, at this time, all the Jewish groups longed for a Messiah. Messiah simply means king in Hebrew. In Greek, if you translate this into Greek, the word is Christos, or Christ. All people longed for a Messiah, or in Greek, they longed for a Christ, who would be a king like David, who would set things right. Messiah means a king like David, who would set things right. Now, you remember the line of Davidic kings came to an end, right? When the Babylonians deported all the people into exile, and they thought that line had come to an end. Now, people remembered David as their greatest king, and they longed for another king like him who would set them free from Roman oppression. Even the Sadducees longed for this, but they hoped that the Messiah wouldn't come too soon because things were pretty good for them and they were profiting from this current situation. But all the rest longed for a Messiah. The Pharisees, the Essenes, and the bandit groups. And even the Pharisees and the Essenes could only imagine that the Messiah would be a violent, powerful king who would come with a mighty army and crush the Romans. Nobody was expecting the Messiah to be like that figure, the suffering servant figure that Isaiah foresaw way back, who was so gentle, wouldn't even break a bruised reed, right? That one. Nobody was expecting the Messiah to be like that. Everybody was expecting the Messiah to be a political figure, a political king, a powerful political king with an army who would throw the Romans out and the people could rule themselves again. That is what the expectation was on the eve of Jesus' birth. This is the context in which Jesus was born into. And next time, as we begin chapter 10 in Manna and Mercy, we will see how Jesus is born and the beginnings of his ministry in this very particular context. So I'm very excited for next time. I'm glad that you stuck with me through all of this. It will make much more sense of Jesus' story and his ministry and his message, so you are well set up now. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your diligence in sticking with the assignments and the homework. Be well, have a good week. The weather is warming up. It's lovely outside. Have a great week, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.